But I also think he now understands I have a job to do, or at least he did on this night, because he said to me early on that he'd seen our last episode, which was the Friday before this dinner. And he said, I thought maybe you'd be nice, but you hit me really hard.
Hold on to your seats, because what just unfolded in the world of politics and pop culture is nothing short of a cinematic plot twist. In a move that stunned his fans and critics alike, outspoken liberal comedian and talk show host Bill Maher accepted an invitation to meet none other than former President Donald Trump. This unexpected meeting took place behind closed doors at Mar-a-Lago, Trump's Florida estate, where the air was already thick with anticipation. Known for his scathing monologues and relentless jabs at Trump on his show Real Time with Bill Maher, no one expected Maher to walk into the lion's den, especially willingly, but he did, and what happened inside that gilded room is now the talk of every news cycle and social media feed. The meeting wasn't just a formality or an effort at political civility. It turned out to be a strategic move by Maher, who reportedly had a long list of concerns, questions, and sharp critiques prepared for the former president. While most expected a tense exchange, or maybe even an outright verbal clash, what really took place was even more shocking. Bill Maher dropped what sources are calling a truth bomb, a moment of unfiltered honesty and brutal realism aimed directly at Trump's inner circle, his post-presidency political maneuvering, and the state of American democracy. Those in the room say Trump, known for his confrontational style, didn't interrupt. He listened. Perhaps it was Maher's boldness, or maybe it was the fact that he came armed with facts, data, and years of public criticism now condensed into a face-to-face confrontation. But the most surprising twist didn't come from Trump himself. It came from Melania. The usually reserved and composed former First Lady, known for staying out of her husband's political scuffles, reportedly walked in on part of the meeting. Her reaction, according to one witness, was absolutely priceless. She appeared visibly shocked to see Bill Maher, someone who had previously mocked her in his monologues, standing casually in their home, fearlessly speaking his mind. The moment was filled with tension, irony, and perhaps even a touch of awkwardness, as Melania reportedly gave a half smile and quietly exited the room without a word. Some insiders even claim she gave Maher a subtle nod of respect, acknowledging the nerve it must have taken to confront Donald Trump in his own territory. What followed the meeting was a media frenzy. Analysts and commentators rushed to speculate on the motives, the implications, and most of all, what this might mean for Trump's political future. Was this a sign that Trump is seeking redemption or rebranding? Is Maher trying to bridge divides in an increasingly polarized country? Or was it just a one-time stunt designed to go viral? Whatever the case, one thing is certain, this was no ordinary encounter. It was a dramatic, unexpected, and downright cinematic moment that reminded the world that in today's America, truth really is stranger than fiction.
No, I don't always agree what my husband is saying or doing, and that's okay.
Okay, example, in the Oval Office, he was showing me the portraits of presidents, and he pointed to Reagan and said, in all seriousness, you know the best thing about him? His hair. I said, well, there was also that whole bringing down communism thing, waiting for the button next to the Diet Coke button to get pushed and I go through the trap door.
In a move that surprised almost everyone, comedian and political commentator Bill Maher, known for his razor-sharp critiques and unapologetically liberal viewpoints, accepted an invitation from none other than Donald Trump himself. Yes, that Bill Maher, who has spent years turning Trump into a recurring punchline, roasting him on everything from his policies to his personality. The news raised more than a few eyebrows. People weren't sure what to expect. Was this an elaborate setup for a comedy bit? Had Maher suddenly changed his political stripes? Was he finally giving in to the chaos just for the thrill of it? But no, this wasn't a buddy-buddy photo op or a sudden red cap conversion. It wasn't a turning point in political alliances. It was something else entirely. Maher entered Trump's domain not as a supporter, but as an observer. He wasn't there to flatter, praise, or soften his well-documented opinions. It was more like entering a living museum exhibit dedicated to political spectacle, a curiosity tour of sorts. The kind of surreal expedition where you're half expecting velvet ropes and guided narration, explaining how this man, Donald J. Trump, defied conventional political wisdom and still managed to maintain an iron grip on his base. Maher, ever the cynic, likely viewed this invitation as an opportunity to explore what he has so often satirized from a distance: the The cult of personality, the bravado, the strange cocktail of charisma and controversy that has defined Trump's public image. But stepping into Trump's world meant more than simply walking through a gilded hallway or shaking hands for a photo op. It meant witnessing up close the machinery behind the persona, the very place where press statements are carefully curated, where grandiose claims are polished, and where the concept of alternative facts perhaps first took root. And if you know Maher, you know he didn't go in quietly. He went in with his trademark smirk, his arsenal of skepticism, and probably a mental notepad full of sarcasm. Yet, even in his most biting critiques, Maher has always shown a curiosity for understanding how things work, even when he despises them. The most fascinating part of this interaction wasn't what was said, but rather what wasn't. It was the silence between the jokes, the body language, the forced civility between two men who, on the surface, couldn't be more ideologically opposed. Maher wasn't there to shake hands with a hero. He was there to look at the phenomenon of Trumpism from the inside out, perhaps to understand how, despite relentless scandals, tweets, and trials, Trump has still managed to hold a mirror up to America and reflect back a version of itself that millions accept, if not admire. And that's where the irony kicks in. The man who once joked that Trump was too dumb to run a lemonade stand was now walking through the empire Trump had built. Not just politically, but culturally. It wasn't a concession. It wasn't a ceasefire. It was Bill Maher doing what he does best, stepping into the storm, smirking at the madness, and taking notes.
That I'm doing this. So Melania Trump has a new book out that she's promoting with video. Stupid press thinks this was all applied to help Trump with suburban women. I don't think that. I think
Bill's decision to meet with former President Donald Trump certainly sparked a wave of backlash, with some critics reacting as if he had just pledged undying loyalty to the Trump is right club. But that knee-jerk outrage misses the deeper point, and more importantly, it misunderstands Bill's role altogether. He wasn't there to praise, endorse, or align himself with Trump's ideologies. He wasn't donning a MAGA hat or echoing campaign slogans. Instead, Bill was doing what real journalists and truth seekers have always done, stepping into uncomfortable spaces, confronting controversial figures, and trying to understand the forces shaping our world. Think of it less as a political statement, and more as a bold move by a veteran observer of society, a modern-day anthropologist entering a volatile terrain, not to participate, but to document and analyze. Meeting Trump in person wasn't about agreeing with him. It was about proximity to power, to influence, and to the polarizing magnetism that Trump still holds over a significant part of the American electorate. It's not unlike a scientist entering the wild to observe a rare and dangerous predator. You don't go because you like the animal. You go because you need to understand how it operates, what drives it, and what impact it has on the ecosystem around it. Trump, whether one loves or despises him, is a cultural force, a kind of political phenomenon that defies traditional analysis from a distance. And Bill, ever the sharp-eyed chronicler of our times, chose to get closer, not to admire, but to examine. The reaction from some corners of the media and the public was swift and severe. The idea of even being in the same room as Trump, let alone holding a conversation with him, has become almost taboo in certain circles. But isn't that the very reason why such conversations are necessary? When dialogue becomes forbidden, when engagement is mistaken for endorsement, we lose one of the most vital tools of a functioning democracy: the ability to question, confront, and investigate all sides without bias. Bill's journalistic mission wasn't to provide comfort, but to stir thought. He went in not with a red hat, but with a pen and a keen mind, knowing full well the storm that might follow. Moreover, this moment reveals something deeper about our cultural climate, a growing discomfort with nuance, with gray areas, with the idea that one can speak to someone controversial without becoming complicit in their views. Bill's move was less about Trump himself and more about the art of fearless journalism, a reminder that real reporting sometimes means getting your hands dirty, walking into hostile territory, and standing your ground. By facing Trump head-on, Bill reaffirmed that the job of the journalist is not to seek safety in echo chambers, but to bring light to places others are too afraid to go. It may be uncomfortable, even infuriating to some, but it's undeniably necessary.
At one point, I said to him, "You're scaring people. Do you really want to be scaring your own citizens so much?" And I know now you're all saying, "And what did he say to that?" Honestly, I don't remember. But it wasn't, "Okay, I'll stop." So MAGA fans, don't worry. Your boy gave me nothing.
Bill's decision to meet with former President Donald Trump certainly sparked a wave of backlash, with some critics reacting as if he had just pledged undying loyalty to the Trump is right club. But that knee-jerk outrage misses the deeper point, and more importantly, it misunderstands Bill's role altogether. He wasn't there to praise, endorse, or align himself with Trump's ideologies. He wasn't donning a MAGA hat or echoing campaign slogans. Instead, Bill was doing what real journalists and truth seekers have always done, stepping into uncomfortable spaces, confronting controversial figures, and trying to understand the forces shaping our world. Think of it less as a political statement and more as a bold move by a veteran observer of society, a modern-day anthropologist entering a volatile terrain not to participate, but to document and analyze. Meeting Trump in person wasn't about agreeing with him. It was about proximity to power, to influence, and to the polarizing magnetism that Trump still holds over a significant part of the American electorate. It's not unlike a scientist entering the wild to observe a rare and dangerous predator. You don't go because you like the animal. You go because you need to understand how it operates, what drives it, and what impact it has on the ecosystem around it. Trump, whether one loves or despises him, is a cultural force, a kind of political phenomenon that defies traditional analysis from a distance. And Bill, ever the sharp-eyed chronicler of our times, chose to get closer, not to admire, but to examine. The reaction from some corners of the media and the public was swift and severe. The idea of even being in the same room as Trump, let alone holding a conversation with him, has become almost taboo in certain circles. But isn't that the very reason why such conversations are necessary? When dialogue becomes forbidden, when engagement is mistaken for endorsement, we lose one of the most vital tools of a functioning democracy: the ability to question, confront, and investigate all sides without bias. Bill's journalistic mission wasn't to provide comfort, but to stir thought. He went in not with a red hat, but with a pen and a keen mind, knowing full well the storm that might follow. Moreover, this moment reveals something deeper about our cultural climate, a growing discomfort with nuance, with gray areas, with the idea that one can speak to someone controversial without becoming complicit in their views. Bill's move was less about Trump himself and more about the art of fearless journalism, a reminder that real reporting sometimes means getting your hands dirty, walking into hostile territory, and standing your ground. By facing Trump head-on, Bill reaffirmed that the job of the journalist is not to seek safety in echo chambers, but to bring light to places others are too afraid to go. It may be uncomfortable, even infuriating to some, but it's undeniably necessary.
So, meet up in person. Maybe it'll be different. Spoiler alert, it was. First good sign, before I left for the Capitol, I had my staff collect and print out this list of almost 60 different insulting epithets that the president has said about me. Things like stupid, dummy, lowlife dummy, sleazebag, sick, sad, stone cold crazy. Really a dumb guy, fired like a dog, his show is dead. There's 60. I brought this to the White House because I wanted him to sign it, which he did.
But then came the moment of truth, an eruption so fierce it sent tremors through every corner of Trump's political universe. On that stage, with the world watching, Bill Maher didn't just deliver another comedic jab, he detonated a truth. Bomb so devastating, so piercing that it tore through the facade of bravado that Donald Trump has spent years constructing. Maher, known for his unapologetically sharp tongue and brutal honesty, transformed what many expected to be a routine political takedown into a fiery public reckoning. This wasn't just another late-night quip. This was a calculated, searing dissection of Trump's legacy, a legacy that, as Maher brutally pointed out, has become synonymous with chaos, confusion, and contradiction. And what made it hit even harder was that Maher didn't rely on exaggeration or political spin. He simply laid bare the facts, the failures, and the farce. Let's not kid ourselves. Trump's tenure in the political arena has been anything but conventional. From day one, he strutted into Washington like a showman who mistook governance for reality TV. Instead of thoughtful policies and strategic diplomacy, the world got headline-chasing drama, spontaneous outbursts on Twitter, and a revolving door of staff resignations and scandals. Maher reminded everyone of these well-documented debacles, from cozying up to authoritarian leaders while alienating long-standing allies, to delivering speeches so rambling and incoherent they seemed more suited for a stand-up routine than presidential addresses. His behavior on the international stage often bordered on theatrical absurdity, leaving diplomats scratching their heads and world leaders questioning America's stability. And then there was the social media circus, a platform Trump treated less so like a communication tool and more like his personal soapbox for late-night rants and policy by impulse declarations. Maher didn't have to dig deep. Trump's own digital footprint provided a mountain of contradictions, hyperbole, and outright misinformation that painted a picture of a leader more obsessed with likes and retweets than with laws and reforms. The idea that complex national and international issues could be solved with a single tweet was laughable to most, tragic even, but Trump doubled down on that strategy time and time again. Maher's takedown also addressed the aftermath. He pointed out that Trump's actions didn't just leave scars on American institutions. They opened wounds that are still healing. The erosion of trust in democratic norms, the divisiveness fueled by inflammatory rhetoric, the lies peddled as truth. These weren't just political missteps. They were systemic cracks that weakened the nation's core. And yet, even in the face of this damning critique, Maher didn't gloat. He didn't laugh maliciously. He simply told the truth, raw and unfiltered. Because in that moment, it wasn't about left versus right or liberal versus conservative. It was about calling out a disastrous record for what it truly was and reminding the world that leadership demands more than theatrics and slogans. It requires substance, empathy, and vision, all qualities Trump consistently failed to deliver.
Do you feel like you're in a different space now than you were 8 years ago?
I feel I was always me the first time as well. I just feel that people didn't accept me, maybe. They didn't understand me the way maybe they do.
She also talked about how she sometimes might disagree with Donald Trump.
Maybe some people, they see me as just a wife of the president, but I'm standing on my own 2 feet, independent. I have my own thoughts. I have my...
Apparently, the ever-composed First Lady of the high society spectacle we call keeping up appearances found herself more than just mildly shaken. She was absolutely rattled. One can almost imagine the scene, Melania Trump lounging in one of the many extravagant wings of a gold-plated estate surrounded by priceless decor, possibly perched on a velvet settee with crystal chandeliers gleaming overhead. Draped in designer silk, her $50,000 handbag resting delicately beside her, she hears the words of comedian and political commentator Bill Maher, words not wrapped in sugar but laced with razor-sharp wit and brutal honesty. For someone who has spent years mastering the art of the neutral expression, her reaction to Maher's commentary must have been a sight to behold, perhaps as expressive as someone biting into a steak so overcooked it defies even Trump's own exaggerated tastes. Because let's be real, when you spend years living in a golden echo chamber where the only sounds are praises, applause, and curated headlines, even a drop of truth hits like a thunderstorm. Bill Maher has never been known to mince his words. Especially when it comes to political critique, his unfiltered monologues often serve as a wake-up call to those nestled in comfort zones built on illusions and self-created myths. And in this case, the illusion in question is the meticulously constructed Trump brand, equal parts reality TV flair, political bombast, and old-school American excess. Melania, by virtue of association, has often been seen as the polished figure silently supporting that brand, maintaining a stoic front through scandals, speeches, and campaign rallies. But what happens when the mask of PR perfection is tested by the force of raw commentary? Maher didn't just jab at policies or gaffes. He poked through the fantasy itself, challenging the very bubble of billionaire delusion that's been carefully protected for decades. To anyone watching from the outside, Maher's critique might have felt cathartic, maybe even necessary, but from within that luxury cocoon, such words likely felt like an earthquake. For Melania, whose public role has always hovered somewhere between elegance and enigma, this kind of direct attack challenges not only her husband's image, but her own position within it. Was she surprised, outraged, amused? No one can say for sure given her famously unreadable demeanor. But one thing's certain, honesty, when delivered without filter, has a way of cracking even the most polished facades. And that's the irony, isn't it? When your entire world is built on image, from the golden elevator rides to the curated Instagram moments, truth becomes the one thing that feels completely out of place. Yet, it's also the only thing that can break through the noise. So while Maher may have simply been doing what he always does, speaking his truth to power, the ripple effect was undeniable. Somewhere behind those gilded walls, a carefully Composed silence may have been interrupted by the sound of reality knocking, and whether Melania chose to ignore it, confront it, or simply roll her eyes. One thing is clear, the truth still matters, even when it makes you clutch your Birkin a little tighter. If you're enjoying this dose of unapologetic commentary, don't forget to subscribe, because the bubble's only getting thinner.
Maybe he would implode on his own. Maybe it falls to you now, Melania. You can end this reign of terror, and all you have to do is channel your inner Taylor Swift and walk out the door. You know you wanna. Your unhappiness is obvious. You despise his creepy little monkey fingers touching your hand.
Trump's entire persona, his political identity, media presence, and business brand revolves around a single unwavering narrative. He is never wrong. No matter what the situation, no matter what the evidence, Donald Trump has built a fortress of denial so thick that facts bounce off it like tennis balls on concrete. Over the years, we've seen him confidently say things that have no basis in reality, whether it's claiming he had the largest inauguration crowd in history, asserting that COVID-19 would disappear like a miracle, or suggesting he won an election he clearly lost. For Trump, facts are simply props, tools to shape whatever story he's selling. If it meant pushing more MAGA hats or stoking his fan base, he might just look up at a clear blue sky and say, "It's green," with full conviction. This strategy has worked well for him in rally speeches, conservative talk shows, and Fox News interviews, spaces where he controls the narrative or at least surrounds himself with those who won't push back. But then enters Bill Maher, a man who has made a career out of challenging delusion with biting satire. When Maher publicly called out Trump's nonsense, it wasn't just entertainment, it was a direct and calculated dismantling of the fantasy Trump has cultivated. Watching Maher do what he does best, mocking hypocrisy with cold, unfiltered truth, was like watching someone stick a needle into a balloon inflated with years of ego and arrogance. That moment wasn't just a punchline, it was a rare and powerful reality check that burst through the carefully built illusion. And while Trump himself wasn't on stage, someone else was. Melania Trump has always presented herself as stoic, calm, and slightly removed from the chaos surrounding her husband, but that detachment wavered for a moment when Maher's commentary landed. She wasn't prepared. After years of watching the world cater to her husband's whims, seeing someone openly mock the myth must have been unsettling. She's used to seeing people tiptoe, to watching critics get silenced, and to hearing applause even when the facts don't align. But Maher doesn't tiptoe. He leaps headfirst into controversy, rips it open, and laughs at the absurdity inside. He doesn't follow the Trump rulebook. He doesn't bend to fear, fame, or fortune. Instead, he twists reality back into shape, even if it stings. And sting it did. Melania's reaction wasn't theatrical, it was revealing. She looked uncomfortable, blindsided by a world where her husband's alternate reality doesn't reign supreme. But perhaps she should be used to it by now. She's been in the front row of the Trump show for years. If anyone knows how frequently that narrative gets challenged, it's her. And yet she seemed genuinely caught off guard, as if the idea of public accountability was foreign. Maybe it's time she learns a trick from her husband. When caught off guard, just deflect, distract, and pretend it never happened. But with someone like Bill Maher around, deflection might not be enough. When a truth bomb drops in the room, you either laugh it off, break down, or completely lose your cool. We all saw which one Melania picked.
Are you being honest? At Trump's speech this month to a joint session of Congress, he claimed the government had spent $8 million making mice transgender. It did not. The $8 million was for transgenic mice, mice that were being genetically modified to study how hormone treatments affect human health. We were splicing their genes, not making them compete in women's sports. We weren't spending $8 million to give mice big balls Or fake tits. Sorry, Stuart Little.
In an unexpected and almost surreal twist, Bill Maher sat down with former President Donald Trump, and surprisingly, the conversation didn't explode into the fiery spectacle most viewers might have anticipated. Known for his razor-sharp wit and unapologetic criticism, Maher approached the interview with a calm, collected demeanor that sharply contrasted with Trump's usual bombastic presence. It was a calculated performance, one that showcased Maher not as a comedian or provocateur, but as a seasoned interrogator wearing a mask of serene diplomacy. Rather than launching straight into his signature takedowns, Maher played it cool, almost too cool, like a veteran teacher trying to guide a rowdy student through a complex lesson without triggering another tantrum. At times, he even offered light praise, subtle nods, and moments of polite agreement that seemed more about keeping the conversation going than endorsing anything of substance. One might have mistaken it for mutual respect, but it was more akin to a zoo visitor trying not to spook the lion. Trump, on the other hand, was predictably himself, flamboyant, defensive, and self-congratulatory to the point of parody. The moment he opened his mouth, the room filled with a familiar cocktail of half-truths, deflections, and bombastic self-promotion. He talked about his perfect policies, his unmatched leadership, and of course how the media has never treated him fairly. It was less an interview and more a monologue with occasional interruptions from reality. Even as Maher nodded along, likely biting his tongue to avoid unleashing a storm of sarcasm, the absurdity of Trump's self-aggrandizement remained front and center. No matter how calm Maher appeared, his eyes betrayed the sheer disbelief of a man listening to someone insist that the sky is green with the confidence of a used car salesman trying to sell a lemon as a luxury vehicle. What made the exchange even more fascinating was the stark contrast between their energies. Maher, ever the composed cynic, played it like a man who's seen it all before, and probably has. Trump, however, was performing for an audience of one, himself. He puffed up every sentence with the flair of a man who's never had to consider. Being wrong never had to question the mirror, and yet somehow Maher's restraint made the circus even louder. His silence echoed more than his words ever could. It was a masterclass in letting someone dig their own rhetorical grave while handing them the shovel with a smile. Ultimately, the interview wasn't a clash of titans. It was a portrait of two men on opposite ends of the intellectual spectrum. Maher,
so when
representing
Moore went
reason,
after him with
patience,
facts,
and restraint,
logic,
tried to
and
steer the
worst of
ship,
all,
while
humor,
Trump remained
you could
proudly
almost hear the
oblivious,
rage
steering his
tweeting
own
again.
narrative no matter how far off course it drifted. It was comedy disguised as journalism, theater cloaked in civility, and in that bizarre calm, the world saw yet another example of how Donald Trump, no matter the setting, remains an unstoppable force of chaotic self-celebration, even when facing one of his most relentless critics.
President Trump is going to run for a third term, and President Trump is going to be elected again on the afternoon of January 20th of 2029. He's going to be President of the United States.
Okay, but the thing I just read in there, it seemed like there was no wriggle room there. It seemed like it was just, 8 or 10 words that said only 2 times.
We have a team of people that are working. A team.
How can a team do something about that? What? I don't care if the team is 12 trillion people. The words are still the words.
Bill, every day in federal courts, right now in federal courts, there's 120 lawsuits on what President Trump's doing for his Article 2 rights on the unified executive theory. But he's chief executive, he's commander-in-chief, and he's chief magistrate and chief law enforcement officer. There's 100, and they're running to court every day to sue President Trump, all because the interpretation of this. The interpretation of this is open for interpretation.
How could it be open? Could I have it back?
But Bill Maher, ever the composed satirist and cool-headed commentator, displayed his usual mastery of turning chaos into comedy without breaking a sweat. Sitting comfortably with his signature smirk and casual candor, Maher managed to navigate yet another controversial media moment with grace, even as the conversation veered toward the unpredictable storm that is Donald Trump. In sharp contrast, Trump, forever the chaotic centerpiece of American politics, once again proved that composure is not his strong suit. While Maher playfully acknowledged Trump's uncanny ability to maintain and manipulate his brand image, it became obvious that Trump's so-called brand thrives not on stability, but on perpetual turbulence. Trump wasn't just participating in the conversation, he was the walking, talking embodiment of a political and personal dumpster fire. And like clockwork, just as the conversation hinted at a rare moment of subtlety or humility, Trump's internal warning system seemed to activate. You could almost hear the mental sirens blaring. Too calm, too rational, do something outrageous. And predictably he did. Rather than seizing the opportunity to appear self-aware or even remotely grounded, Trump defaulted to the kind of boastful bravado that has defined his public persona for decades. As if on cue, he launched into a reminder of his self-proclaimed greatness, not just in business or politics, but on an absurdly cosmic scale. He revisited the bombastic claim that he was the chosen one, an audacious declaration that once shocked the world and is now recycled as part of his theatrical routine. For Trump, humility is weakness, and silence is an enemy. Every pause must be filled, every moment of reflection overridden with grandiosity. The result, a spectacle so loud and self-absorbed that it drowns out any semblance of meaningful discourse. What? Maher seemed to subtly highlight with his wit and restrained amusement is that Trump's performative nature is no accident. It's deliberate. His brand isn't built on accomplishments. It's built on attention, good or bad, outrageous or ridiculous, it doesn't matter. As long as the spotlight remains fixed on him, the brand remains intact. Trump's genius, if one can call it that, lies in his ability to weaponize chaos, to feed off the flames of controversy, and to blur the line between political leader and pop culture phenomenon. But that very strategy exposes an uncomfortable truth. Trump is a man trapped within his own performance. His entire public identity depends on being larger than life, and the moment he attempts to be normal, the illusion cracks. He can't afford to be calm, to show restraint, or to engage with the world as a regular human being, because that would unravel the mythology he spent years constructing. Maher, with his trademark smirk, didn't need to say it outright. His poise contrasted so starkly with Trump's theatrical desperation that the irony spoke for itself. In the end, Maher didn't just comment on Trump, he exposed him. Quietly, effectively, and without ever raising his voice, he reminded us, all that the emperor may still be marching proudly, but the robes are long gone.